Happy Thursday, everyone. Happy Thursday. I hope that you are having an amazing Thursday. Listen, I don't have a podcast. I do not have a podcast, but if I did have a podcast today, we would be talking to the amazing, listen, I have been calling this person the king among kings, father among fathers. He walks heavy, you guys, and you will get to sense what I sense whenever I'm in his presence, okay? James Wright. I will be talking to James Wright about a Black father's perspective on lots of things that we will get into in a second. Before I bring him up, I wanted to just read a short bio. You know, people have their bios, right? And so I went onto his LinkedIn. I slid into his LinkedIn and I said, I have to read all of this, all of it. It says that I am a dynamic and results-driven leader with over 19 years of experience in developing, implementing, and managing community service programs and initiatives. My career is marked by a passion for driving positive change and empowering individuals and families through innovative solutions and strategic planning. Listen, he has been a triple peer for the longest. In this role, he oversees the implementation of positive parenting programs. Hey, positive parenting, triple peers. And he has a rich background in psychology. And I did not know this part, James, is that he is the current director of ministries and chief of staff at the Calvary Christian Church of the Apostolic Faith. I almost got a rug, James. I almost got a rug. Let me go ahead and bring James out. Well, let me just say that he says that I am dedicated to promoting cultural humility, inclusivity, and trauma-informed care in all of his endeavors. And professional journey reflects a commitment to bringing meaningful impact and driving sustainable growth in the communities that he serves. Let's bring him on up to the stage.
Hello. Now you got me blushing. Who are you even talking about?
Yes, it is amazing. Listen, I was telling someone that I wanted to do a few sessions. First of all, I'm always amazed when a Black brother will engage me in a conversation, because sometimes I don't know why. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about this, but the brothers don't like to talk. What is that about?
You know, men are normally a few words, and we act it out. And I can tell you that if you can tell everything about a man by how he's acting. In my home growing up, my daddy was a preacher, so he talked. So I learned to talk a lot too. So preaching runs in my blood. My grandma was a preacher, my daddy's a preacher, my mom was a preacher, and so that's why we just do a whole lot of talking. My family, we just talk too much.
Yeah, and it's so funny that you say that, because I really had no idea that you were in the church, had leadership responsibilities in the church, but I knew it. I didn't know it, but I knew it. And it's so interesting how that works. You really have a really strong presence, and you have like this like fatherly role. Like when I think about you, you are like a father of fathers. Like I really do mean that. Like you are, I can tell that you're very nurturing and that you're very strong, and you are like, you mean business. Like you mean business in your role as a father. And I know that I appreciate that as just a part of the community. And I'm sure that people tell you that all the time. I am
absolutely
positive.
Well, I'm sad to say that people don't say it all the time, but it feels good hearing it from you. And I say that for all fathers, say it to them, let them know, even though they may not act like they hear it, they may not act like they want to hear it, tell them. And that goes back to even my triple P hat. When you're thinking about teenagers, when you're thinking about kids, praise always works, whether or not you think it's working or not. Our adult minds thrive off of positive reinforcement and praise as well. So if you have a dad that you want to see become more engaged, try engaging positively with them and just letting them know that you appreciate the strength that they bring and how they show up in your life and in children's lives. So it's meaningful to hear it.
Yeah,
I have heard it. I just don't hear it all the time.
yeah,
My
yeah,
wife reminds me often of the great job I do as a father. And
yeah.
my children do too. So
Yeah, that's amazing. And this is Father's Day weekend. We're coming up to
yes,
Father's Day weekend. And so this is a time where we are wanting to honor dads, not just with our words, but sometimes you can give them the big piece of chicken too, right?
absolutely.
I love
Absolutely.
that. I love that. So, speaking of your family, tell us a little bit more about your family and how you kind of found your path into community. And this is something else I didn't know. I knew that you work for community mental health, but I didn't know how strongly your kind of footprint is in this field. So, tell us about how you found your path into this kind of field.
Oh man. So when I left home to come to college, I just knew that I was going to be a pediatrician from third grade. Right. And so I took that biology class my freshman year. I'd always done great in biology all through high school, A's. It just came natural. I didn't have to study, which is where I found my struggle was. I took that biology class and it kicked my butt. And I said, you know what? Ain't no way I'm finna be in school 13 years to do this. And so just so happened I had taken a psychology course as well, and I fell in love with it. And
Mhm.
I said, oh, this might be it. And then I got a year from graduating, and I took another course called Intro to Social Work. And I said, oh, this might be it.
Mhm.
And I realized through prayer that my passion, even back to the mind of being a pediatrician, was just to help people.
Yeah.
And it was what my family had always done my entire life. And like I said, being a PK, we were always helping and supporting others in any way that we could. So, it was just my heart through the example that had been set, from grandparents on down to help others. And so I was drawn to the field in that way. And my first job I got was at a group home and seeing young men in group home care, and how sometimes it was just ineffective. And then even from that work, I eventually became a group home manager, and I ended up becoming guardian for two of my boys. Those are who I call my two oldest
Mhm.
boys, or I call them my brother as well. So and I had to raise them from 15 to 16 years old, and
Wow.
so still involved with them now. And so that kind of drove my passion into mental health, working with families and supporting. I've been an MST therapist. I've been intensive in home. I've,
Oof.
I've done it all. And then I shifted into transitional living, supporting individuals aging out of foster care, or young adults, 16 to 24 years old, just going into adulthood. And then my wife and I were expecting our first child, and I said, I got to make some money because this little $30,000 ain't gonna cut it no
It's
more.
not cutting it
It's,
no
yeah, it's
more.
not just
Not
gonna
when you
be
have your family.
just
Mhm.
me and the boys anymore. So I shifted and came into social work on the county level, and for the last 13 years, I worked for Mecklenburg County. The last 6 or 7 of those have been here with Triple P.
Wow, that's amazing and impressive. That is amazing and impressive. What has been kind of your, I guess, I want to hear two things. What has been the most impactful experience that you've had in your work, and not just impactful in a positive way, but more impactful in a way that makes you sit back and say, we need to do something different.
Right. Um, I think the most impactful, both professional and personal, has been my boys that I became guardian of, because I stepped in at a time where I felt like I needed to save these guys' lives.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that at that point they didn't have um, family that could step up. For them, teenagers are challenging, right?
Mhm.
So nobody wants to get a teenager that already presents with issues. And so I helped myself learn the challenges of caring and raising teenagers to be able to help others. So I
Mhm.
impacted their lives. I impacted my life, and it impacted me professionally. So to be able to support so many people with those same challenges. So I had two young men that had been in foster care that I had become their guardian for. It helped me when I became a foster care worker at a point, to be able to relate to foster parents in a way that was meaningful, to be able to work with those parents whose children were in the system to understand in a meaningful way. And so I think that that was one of the most impactful. And of course, in this field, you're impacted always. And so there have been many things that have just been so impactful to me, but that was one of the most impactful.
Yeah, I love that you started at home, like in your front. This is so interesting because, I've been homeschooling the last 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter is transitioning. I think I reserve the right to change my mind at any moment.
Absolutely. You do. We all do.
Yeah, but my littlest is transitioning, I think, to public school this year. And I was kind of just sitting back and just trying to say, okay, what's next for me? And I was thinking about impact, right? And thinking about the community. How do I get back out there? And God had to remind me, wait a minute, Ty, this is community service.
Absolutely.
Raising your family and contributing to your own family, your own household is an act of service to the community, not just for your family, but to the community.
Absolutely. We are raising adults. These young people will be contributors to our community. So we have a responsibility to pour into them in meaningful ways so that when it's time for them to contribute, they have a well to draw from. That's all we can do for our kids, is continue to fill their well so that when they need it, they can dip back down and pull up what they need. And that's what our parents did for us. And, I've been in a place where I've been working with adults that just didn't have a well, and it hit me. Another impactful moment, this person has nothing to draw from, because there have been generations of things in her life that where people just weren't there for her, and in turn this individual's not there for her children, and it's a kind of a cycle that they're caught up in. So when you have the honor and privilege to pour into your family, to make sure that you're creating individuals that are going to pour into community in a way that's meaningful, however that looks, you have been a community servant for the past 5 years, certainly.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. And it's interesting what you just said in regards to, you recognize that the person that you were interacting with did not have a well to draw from. That's an interesting way to say that. How do you, in your role as a community activist, I'm looking at you as a community activist. How do you, as a community activist, how do you manage that? How do you pull people forward that don't have that well to draw from?
And that's what makes this work challenging, right? Because then the work becomes very personal, because for me, it was, why did the Lord put this person in my path?
Yeah.
Why me, right?
Yeah.
And so my kids would come home sometimes and talk about being bucket fillers and how to pour into others in a way that fills their bucket instead of pulling away from their bucket or emptying their bucket out. And so I took the belief that the Lord had this individual in my path to pour into their bucket, to pour into their well. It doesn't become my responsibility solely, but they're here, they're in my face right now. So every interaction that I had, I made it intentional. I made sure that I was, being the person to meet their needs, being the person to encourage them, being the person to fill their bucket even more, so that at a certain point, they may not have a well right now, because you got to fill it some kind of way, but the bucket is full. So you're starting there. It's kind of how to eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So you're filling the bucket a cup at a time.
I love that. And, James mentioned that he is a triple peer. I am a triple peer as well. And we just recently did a training. It wasn't a triple P training. It was a training on mommies and babies and how to establish support for moms and babies within themselves. But you self-disclosed some about some health struggles that you had recently. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about especially as men, I want to transition to talking about fathers, right? Fathers that are leading their homes, leading in the community. What happens when the leader is struggling with their own challenges and they still have the expectation that they're supposed to show up? And sometimes there's this silence where they can't say, but I'm having my own thing. I heard you talking about, yeah, I was having my own thing, but I have this wife. You said you have these kids. Like, what
Right.
about those dads that may be in the same kind of situation?
I think that the most important thing is during those times I could not expect my wife to be a mind reader, right? So I couldn't expect her to just assume that I was, feeling a certain way. And so, when I met my wife, I was on dialysis. So, I'll share kind of what I had going on. So this wasn't a situation that was going away anytime soon. So I was, daily on dialysis. I was on dialysis 6 years and 8 months before I was called for a transplant. We were married in 2011. I didn't get a transplant until 2016. So, and we met the year I started dialysis. And so just had to shout my wife out because she wasn't superficial at the time to think that, here's this sick guy that I'm going to have to take care of for the rest of my life. She was able to look beyond that, and we were able to be friends first, develop a relationship that continues to grow today. And, eventually is what made me a father. Mm-hmm. And so I think communication was key. So if I was feeling off, if I was feeling down, if I felt like there was a time or a season that I felt like I wasn't going to be able to show up how I wanted to, I needed to be able to express that in a way. And unfortunately, we opened talking about how
that's exactly what I went to. Yeah.
How men don't communicate the best, and how oftentimes we feel like we have to carry the brunt of worries and concerns on our own shoulders. And we'll take it to our friend group. We'll talk about it in a way that we feel like it's palatable for our homeboys and be like, hey, the old girl tripping, she talking about yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes still then not taking ownership of the lack of communication. So even in my friend group, we challenge each other. We talk about real issues and we say, hey, have you tried this? What about this? Are you communicating the way you should? Because Black marriage is important. Black families are important, and we want to see them successful and not just talk about it in a way that's not going to be edifying or beneficial to each other. So communicating how you feel, and it's give and take. And so if we're talking about in a marriage situation, there are times that that I was sick and couldn't show up. Well, in the same token, there are times that my wife was in school, and she couldn't show up, how she wanted to. So we had to carry each other at times. Yeah. And so it's a partnership that we have. And whether you're co-parenting and you're not together, whether you're dating and you're not married, that communication is always going to be key. And in particular, when you're co-parenting and you're not seeing each other every day, and there isn't just clues or context outside of what might be happening, you got to communicate even more then. And it may feel more uncomfortable that you're communicating something that you think it's not someone else's business. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about what's best for the child that's involved, you want to over communicate and say, hey, this is the situation that I have going on. I'm unemployed right now. I've been there in times past. My heart is to be there until I find a job. I'm not going to be able to show up the way that I want to. If I just want you to understand that you can't get blood out of a turnip, right? So if the money's not there, it's not that I don't want to do it. I'm searching as hard as I can. And, I've applied here, there, and everywhere, and I'm just waiting to hear calls back. So just as another example outside of just illness, but communication is always key in any partnership or relationship.
Yeah, that's so good, because I think that's, especially you mentioned co-parenting, especially with co-parents, I do the co-parenting counseling and I am a co-parent too. Sometimes the dynamic can be where we see each other as enemies.
Right.
And we're not enemies. We are literally on the same team.
Yes.
So I think that it's very important, that communication piece, and just, I think communication and honor. I talk a lot about honor.
Really good.
Honor is so important in just any relationship dynamic, but the communication piece, how can someone honor something that is unspoken, right?
Absolutely. And you brought up another thing for me that I want to mention, is just self-awareness. It is being aware yourself of how you might be feeling, how you might be showing up. Because if you're not aware first, then you're not you're missing something. So we talked about being co-parents and why communication is important. And in that same regard, you got to be aware of how it may come off, how you're presenting, how it shows up, and just self-awareness is so important so that you can know that I feel frustrated about this, not that. So it's not the kid that's the problem. It's not the child's mother that's the problem. It's this situation that's frustrating me. So I need to make sure that I'm aware of that so that when I show up in this space, I'm not bringing that with me and in our conversations and communication.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And this is a good conversation because all weekend we've been having this conversation about the movie Straw. And I don't know if you watched the movie Straw. Have you had a chance to watch it?
My wife watched it and I strolled TikTok, so I saw pieces of it and I got the gist of it.
Yes.
So yeah.
So I'm titling this conversation a Black father's perspective. And I put a Black father's perspective because this is soapbox moment. I don't like when Black people are responsible for speaking for the whole race or the
right.
And so I'm saying this is a Black father's perspective. This is James's perspective.
Right.
Right. So what is your perspective of that movie Straw?
So I'm stuttering because my mind is everywhere about different pieces of it. So let's just preface all this by saying it's a Tyler Perry movie. So you got all of those elements that he brings to movie and his set, so in how he presents it. So that aside, I think that the content was powerful. I think that you had a mother with the burden of carrying everything for a child. And spoiler alert. So if you haven't watched it, you may want to skip over.
But not at this point. It's all over social media.
Right. So yeah.
I'm contributing to the.
Right. So you have a mom who's in the throes of what we find out is a mental health crisis that has gone above and beyond to figure out what she can do to handle what she needs to handle for her child. So it's real life that moms carry this weight, and especially when you have a child that may have different needs, whether it's medical, whether it's developmental or academic or whatever different needs your child may have, and you just want to meet the needs of your child. And I think we've all been to a place where we feel like I would rob a bank for my child if it came down to it. We all say, I'll kill for my child. Mm-hmm. And my wife is as meek and humble as she is. If you want to hear her roar, mess with these kids. She will go toe to toe with you. And anything else she can ignore. But them kids, you're going to hear it out. And I think that that was very present in this film. That's my take on it. So, don't mess with a mom and her babies.
Don't mess with a mom and her baby. A lot of people are saying, well, where was the dad? Where was the dad? And how do we get dads back in the home? We talked a little bit about co-parenting. We talked about communication when dad may be having their own thing going on, but the baby still needs dad.
And I think that that's a misperception in our community. I think that statistics show differently about Black males and how they show up in community. And all of us probably know a mother that is doing it by themselves from their perspective. But at the same token, we know single fathers and single mothers. So where does that title come from? These are parents who are not together or single and they're raising children. And the thing is, so if you have one couple, both of them can be single parents, but it depends on who they're with at the time. You're still a single father or a single dad. The misperception is that Black fathers are absent from homes, and it's just not true. Studies show that Black fathers are even more mothering at times to their children than in times past. Now, there was a generation when Black fathers were absent because there were different needs. Mothers didn't work at that time. Fathers needed to be out working, a lot to ensure that houses were taken care of. But in today's society, Black fathers, whether they're in the home or you're co-parenting, they're still present. And when parents aren't together and in a committed relationship, it just looks different. And I think that we also have to talk about mothers that gatekeep, and that means mothers that stand in the way of fathers being there for their child.
Mm-hmm.
And there's but so much a father can take, right? And so after you gatekeep for years and years and years, most fathers are going to step back and say, well, I got to throw my hands up because I'm not going to fight. Or I don't have the knowledge to fight. I've been put down. I don't have the will to fight. I got to encourage fathers to take hold of the legal system as much as we may feel like it's against our people. You got to get into the courts for visitation. Visitation is separate from child support. They're two separate things. So just because someone may be put on child support in North Carolina, it's not the same thing as visitation. So you, as a father, have just as many rights as mothers do. You just got to go to the courts to go through that. And it may be an ugly period or season, having to pull the courts into personal family issues. But sometimes if you have a mother that gatekeeps, that says, I have an infant or I have a young child, I'm not going to let you see them. I don't trust you with my child, or whatever personal issues or reasons they may have, let the courts make the decisions. And if she has a valid reason for why she can't trust you, fix it. If it's drug use, if it's dangerous activities in your home, change it, fix it, do something about it. Otherwise, go to the courts, present each side, let the courts make the decision about the rearing of this child and what's best for the courts. And so you can be the petitioner. You in Mecklenburg County, you can go to the 3rd floor. There's a self-help center, and they'll walk you through what paperwork you need to file. There's no such thing as emergency custody, but you can file and have your case heard out. You'll have the opportunity to see a mediator and all of that, but you want to hear it out. And sometimes, as bad as we think about child support, it just may be right to put yourself on it so that you can have the financial obligation taken care of, get the visitation taken care of, and then just do it by the book so that personal issues and disagreements can be set aside, and then you have the law on your side when it's time for you to have visitation with your child.
100%. 100%. I love that. And I love that you made the point that Black fathers are in the homes. They are in their children's life. And sometimes it just looks different. And so the perception is, it's the media. I love that. And it's so interesting and very necessary, because I think because of that expectation that they're not in the home, but when they show up, like, for example, my daughter's dad will go to appointments, like medical appointments. And when he shows up at she gets treated differently just because of his presence. Right. And that is so wow to me.
Right. I remember walking with my baby in the carrier through Concord Mills Mall, and all the eyes that I got, it was like, a Black dad carrying a baby, and people were in awe. But it's just such a reality. Showing up to appointments, showing up to prenatal appointments with my wife, they were just surprised that somebody was there. But the thing is, everybody's situation is different. Doctor's appointments don't gel for everybody. Sometimes families say, hey, you take the kids to the doctor. I'm handling business. So, and do what works for your families, but be there. And Black dads in general are there. They're not there any less than any other demographic of people.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that from a Black father perspective. Because I'm always saying, look, it is everyone's constitutional rights. It's in the Constitution. To be able to parent their child. Absolutely. It is in the Constitution. So Thank you for saying that. But I want to kind of dig into that a little bit more in regards to dads that don't have that well that you spoke to. How do they become a father that, like, I called you a father of fathers, a king of kings. Like, I call it like that presence and just knowing what to do in your home. with not even if you're not in the home, but just with your child. Like, what if you don't know how to do because you never had the role model?
Right.
You don't have the wisdom, the guidance. Like, you don't know what. Speak to those dads.
This is really good, Ty, because a lot of people assume that there's this kind of switch that turns on when you become a mother or a father, right? And it's not just a switch that comes on. You do become that thing, right? So you embody what you are, but the way that we parent is how we were parented. And sometimes that's fortunate, but sometimes that's unfortunate. So for those dads that, like I mentioned, may not have a well to draw from, they may not have had the most positive example of someone in their lives, it's going to be important that you get with community, get with individuals. And we're in an age now where there is a Black Fathers group on Facebook that was originated in Charlotte, North Carolina, that is now, nationwide. It's been on Good Morning America, but there are fathers there that people ask questions of and talk to. And I can talk from my personal experience. I came to Charlotte as a 17-year-old. Just very green young man, and I'm thankful for my church community because I locked in with a church that loved on me. The deacons there, put me under their wing. The pastor took me under his wing, so I have, an additional spiritual father here, and then I got a bunch of pops and deeks at the church that took me in. They corrected me, when I was wrong and when I needed to be corrected, and I took heed to correction, which is the key. I took heed to correction and got back in the role. So when I started veering off, I got back in the role because I listened to community. And so now my children are fortunate to have, aunts, uncles, and people who are not blood related naturally, but we have community and for me, that was connecting with a church community. For you, it may be, just connecting with school friends. It may be connecting with college friends. It may be connecting with the group on Facebook or any other group that you can find, but connecting with individuals that can polish and groom you to be better than what you are, someone that you can ask questions about. And then just on a very formal note, we say we're Triple Peers. That is a program that's available to fathers. If you don't know how to parent, Triple P, from my eyes, is that handbook for how to parent. Really, and they have Triple P for baby. They have Triple P for all the way up to 17-year-olds. So even if you're just now starting out and your son, your daughter is 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, you can jump in there and to start learning how to build better relationships. And that's what that program is about. And I'm just taking a shameless plug because it's not about taking over and telling you what to do as a parent, but it just presents to you resources that you can use. And so just looking into resources like Triple P, which is evidence-based, which means that it's been researched, it's been studied across cultures, across countries, across communities, and it works. And so as a Black man, I'm telling you, it's worked in my home. I have a 12, 7, and 9-year-old, and they've been Triple P'd ever since my oldest baby was 5 years old. So it's worked wonders for my wife and I.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And they even have Triple P for co-parenting.
Yes.
If you struggle with co-parenting, they have Triple P for everything. And I love that because my oldest was just a Triple P baby.
Right.
I started taking Triple P when he was young. Mm-hmm. And all I knew was to spank.
Right.
All I knew was to spank. And if you take spanking away, do we have any other parenting skills, right?
And I challenged myself with that because, when I became introduced to Triple P, which was before I came, over to Triple P, and I was, working for DSS at the time, and we were telling parents that they couldn't use corporal punishment or spank their children. Mm-hmm. And it's not that it's against the law, but there are differences of opinions about it. And, in DSS, that's a completely different subject because you have children who may already be coming out of abuse, so you don't want to put your hands on them. So I challenged myself from when my daughter was born to not use corporal punishment. Now, that doesn't mean it's not in my wheelhouse.
I'm telling you
that I won't pop that butt when I need to. But like you just mentioned, when you take away spanking, what else do you have?
What else do you have?
I was spanked. I was whooped. So my parents, we got beaten. But my dad also talked to us. He also told us why. He also communicated with us. And so, and how I see it is generation upon generation, because my dad's perspective was that he was just whooped and his dad didn't talk to him. Love my granddaddy to pieces, RIP. But he said granddaddy didn't talk to him. And so he talked our heads off. And so every generation gets better and better. So I'm proud to say that I don't have to use corporal punishment in my home. I think each of my children, I've had to use it one time on each of them, and that's it. And that's the thing about Triple P, where it doesn't tell you what to do, because if I want to, I can use corporal punishment on my children. It's not against the law, but I'm 6'6". You can't see that sitting down. I'm big, and I didn't feel good standing over a little 2-year-old who comes up to my calves and then trying to pop on them and hit on them. And so I needed to be different. My voice is heavy, as you can see. And so I'm this big, scary guy, and I want to develop a positive relationship with them, but I'm beating on them. And so I made the decision not to use that. And my relationship is wonderful with my children. We talk about anything that comes to our minds, we talk about it, and that's what's important. It's important now, and you heard I said 12, 7, and 9. It's going to be important at 22. It's going to be important at 17. It's going to be important at 15. So I'm building relationships now, so that when it's important, the relationship is in place. Because at that time, at 22, 25, I can't fight anymore. We all going to jail.
We gonna all be squaring up. Right. And it's so interesting, because I've done, you mentioned MST, you mentioned like all these in-home, I've done community support team, I've done intensive home, and there are families that square up with one another.
Oh yeah. I've been there on Christmas Day, the happiest day of the year. I've been there with kids throwing their toys over the balcony, and mom's calling me because I don't know what to do, and I want to drag this kid across this room, and and I've been there with 15-year-olds bigger than mom and dad, and they fighting them. And so there are situations. There are times it's easy to see the little kids and not imagine that one day they're going to be young people. They're going to be young adults, and that you're going to want to have impact in their lives. And you don't want to be the parent that when children get older, they just cut you off, right? They just, and I've seen that become a fad, right? Where parents where children become adults and cut their parents off. And don't get me wrong, there are challenges in relationships that happen in their ebbs and flows when you're raising children. We all went through them, even as young people with our own parents. But ultimately, my parents are my life right now, and I want my children to feel the same way about me.
That's so good. I love that. You brought up two things that I wanted to touch on. The first one, and I'm going to say both of them so I won't forget.
Okay.
The first one is about accountability. You mentioned going to community and being able to be in community. Sometimes we think that community means I'm just getting support. But sometimes community means I'm being held accountable. Sometimes community means I might hear some feedback. I want you to touch on how do just fathers deal with that part, because sometimes, machismo comes up, right? So I want to talk about that. But then I also, and this is a note so I won't forget, you mentioned like, I'm this big, scary guy. And that made me think about like where we are in this society today, and how do we talk about that with our kids, and how do Black dads deal with that in society, that portrayal of Black men in society. So those are two things that came up, and I wanted to start.
Wonderful. So accountability is so important. And I think it's important to know that oftentimes when accountability comes in the moment, we like our self rises up. We're like, oh, who you think you're talking to as a man? Right. First, and then what you need is to take time. I would encourage people, when you're hearing feedback, about something that you may need to correct or anything that's going on in your life, give yourself a day to think about it. Oftentimes, and I had to say this to my daughter just recently, like, why would I make this up? What do I get out of making up that this is something you need to work on? Because the person that's bringing it to you is coming out of love 9 times out of 10. There are situations that are outliers where there could be different things going on, but most times people that are coming and giving you something and holding you accountable to something are coming out of love, even if it doesn't look like you want it to look, right? Even if, because generations present these things differently. So if we're talking about an old deacon in the church, they're gonna give it like it is, right? They're gonna tell you, and where it happens, they may tell you right then. So you got to take into account a lot of things. You may be feeling embarrassed, you may be disappointed in yourself, and disappointed that you were called out like this in front of other people. And so you got to take all those feelings into consideration. Give yourself 24 hours to think about it. You're gonna be mad first, but process through what they actually said, and then make a plan for how you can be better and show up better next time. Doesn't even oftentimes need more conversation around it. It just needs to show up differently, because behavior, again, is how we communicate.
I love that. I love that so much. I love that, like practicing the pause. I talk a lot about practicing a pause. And
Absolutely.
that 24 hours gives you plenty of time to, number one, regulate yourself.
Absolutely.
And then like really get someone's intentions, because, our community members, although they may be trying to hold you accountable, they also are not perfect in their delivery, but their intentions, like you said, are most times good. And if you can bring yourself to a place where, what was their intention?
Right.
Are they trying? Then you can see things differently, right?
That's so good. Anything that's going to make you better in the end is good for you.
Yeah. They just didn't know how to say it, but they had the right heart. Yeah, I love that. And then that last question about just society and image, Black men's image in society. What are we doing?
That's so challenging because so many people have been programmed to our skin color is weaponized, and I've taken the approach with my children, and it may not be everybody's cup of tea, unpopular opinion, but I let my kids run around the grocery store just like all the other kids. I let them laugh and be loud. I let them stand in the way if somebody comes up. I don't teach them to make themselves small for anybody. I teach them that you own space as well. You don't need to show up differently just because of your skin color, but also understand how people may perceive you differently, because there is an unconscious that I feel like our community has had for so long, where we were the ones that say, oh, excuse me, and we try to kind of cower down. Just think about being in a grocery store and 2 people standing in an aisle, and one person won't say anything to you, but they need to get past you.
Yeah.
I stand there and I look at the aisle, and I take up space because I deserve this space. I own this space just as much as anybody else does. And so if you need to get by, you can politely say, excuse me, and then I'll ask my children to, y'all move on out the way so this individual can get through. But, speak, and that's just one example. Of course, when it comes to more formal interactions, in school, I teach them to behave, to listen to authority, and I, my wife is an assistant principal, and my boys go to her school now. And the reason why I had to remove them from the school that they were at, because for some time we wanted them to have their own school experience absent of my wife's input or presence, just because she was the AP. In hindsight, it was just crazy of us because they have done so great this school year. My Black boys are excelling in everything, fours and fives on EOGs, all A's. I think 1B, the whole school year. I'm just extremely proud of how they show up academically and behaviorally. Because I've never gotten calls, but I had a situation at the previous school where the teacher started to look at my son, my middle son, and just accuse him of things. Now at this point, he was in third grade and had I never have gotten a call from school concerning his behavior, and she is accusing him of playing in the bathroom. No, my son's not perfect. But the situation was he asked to go to the bathroom and had just been probably 10 or 15 minutes prior. And I said, well, why wouldn't you let him go to the bathroom where he had just gone? Well, he doesn't need to tell you what he was doing in the bathroom, and he was in there by himself. Maybe he had to take a bowel movement, right? And so I know that studies show that Black boys in classrooms are watched closer than any other children in the classroom. And so if you keep your eye on everything that somebody's doing, you're bound to catch them doing something, right? Yeah. But if you watch everybody equally, you might catch something different. You might see something different. Well, she didn't have any proof when I dug deeper that he was playing. And, my son, he goes to the bathroom a lot because he had some bladder issues going on that we had to get straightened out. We didn't know about it at that time. We just knew that he went to the bathroom a lot. Yeah. And she caused him to use the bathroom on himself in the class, which is embarrassing. In the third grade, he asked to go, but I teach him to be to listen to authority. And so I have to find the balance. But then I had to find an environment that was better for my kids. So a few things. Find the right environment for your children if you have the luxury to do so. Challenge. You as a parent, challenge where challenges are needed in a respectful, in a way that's meaningful. I took this situation on up to individuals, the principals, the zone superintendents, and individuals that needed to hear about it so that trainings and things could be put in place. I train all the time about implicit bias, undercover biases and things like that, but you don't know what you don't know. So this teacher just may not have been aware. And so I was happy to be a part of her journey to help make her aware. But I also wanted to make sure that my Black boys did not get a bad taste in their mouth about school so that they can continue to excel academically.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I hope I answered the question.
No, you absolutely did. You absolutely did. I love that you didn't just take the teacher's side, because sometimes I believe that one of our roles as a parent is to teach our kids to advocate for themselves.
Absolutely.
In order to trust that I can advocate for myself, people have to listen, right? And people have to also show me how to do it. And so that was amazing that you didn't just take the teacher's side. You actually questioned her authority, which is your role modeling. And you went up the chain. You didn't just stop at because.
Right.
That is so important in fathering.
Right. It's our responsibility to advocate for our kids. They don't always have voice. They don't always know what. And we have to protect our kids. And as a father and protector, that's a part of what that role is too. And I was, very, very privileged to have the right to be able to, and they were in a magnet program, so I could easily pull them out. And if I needed to, I could have, sent them back to their home school and look for a better situation there. But I was blessed and privileged enough to have an inside scoop to get them to one of the best elementary schools in Charlotte. So I feel blessed because of that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Amazing. You've given us so much to think about today. As we end, in light of Father's Day, I want you to share, if you're comfortable, one of the most impactful, the story that I've been asking on my stories is to tell us a story about your father and the impact that he's had on you.
Oh,
you talked about it a little bit earlier, but give us a good your dad.
My dad is Bishop Larry O'Wright from Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's former city councilman in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's been a minister, a pastor since the year I was born. So all my life, I've known him as such a role model. But what I appreciate most about him is just his down to earthness. My dad's not a preacher at home, he don't walk around and preaching, at the house.
And thank you.
Right. He's so down to earth. Taught me how to play spades.
Yeah.
Taught me how to get some ribs and talk to the girls. So he was there. My dad was a drill sergeant. I grew up apostolic. If you know anything about Pentecostal apostolic churches, so people would think that God, it was strict over there, and it was.
So.
We had structure in our home, but we also had freedom to grow, to develop. He understood even back then the importance of more talking than whooping a belt. But we also had the Superman where we was flying and he was whooping. But he's been such a role model in my life. And I mentioned earlier that you only know how to parent how you've been parented. Mm-hmm. And so much of how I parent, I pull from the many, many conversations that I've had with him. We even went through times that of just great disagreement, just times that I, as a teenager, just didn't like my dad. Mm-hmm. And, when you start to smell yourself, as old people say, you go through those times. And then I remember when I got 20-something, maybe between 23 and 25, when I started to realize who he was and how important it was that he was a part of my life, that he was so consistent, always a provider. He worked extremely hard. He retired from the military at 37 and then didn't stop there, continued to work, continued to build, continued to provide. So all of the things that you read about in my bio early on are, can really be attributed back to him and how he's been a community activist, how he's shown up for people our entire lives, how he's been community for so many fathers that didn't have a well to pour from, and he's poured into individuals. And so it was really a natural feel or flow for me to flow into the areas of life that I have flowed into. And so I appreciate my dad so much for being there, for being an example of what to do, what not to do, being honest and transparent with us about those things. And it was just my brother and I growing up, and I have my two boys, but I'm blessed with a girl as well who's their mommy number two. But I certainly know that I got these boys down lock, and my girl's teaching me a lot about how to be a girl dad. So thanks so much, Dad, and for all that he continues to pour into. And he's always just a well of wisdom and support that I can call anytime for advice or whatever. So thank you, Dad, for being there, and happy Father's Day. This is your Father's Day gift.
I'm sending them this. I love that. I love it so much. And it's so funny. I've been talking a lot about generational curses and how we're always like, we got to break the generational curse. We also have generational blessings, and everything that you just talked about. Those are blessings that you got from your dad that have passed down, I'm sure, from his dad and further on, right? And so that is a blessing. That is a blessing that you had that experience and that you are now sharing the experience and passing it on to your own kids. So amazing job. Thank you so much for giving us so many gems and
thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, you guys, I will see you guys next time.